At 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be homeless, standing in a downpour with nothing but a small suitcase and a plastic bag containing the few precious items I'd managed to salvage from the flood. The rain fell in sheets around me, soaking through my already damp clothes as I stood outside my son's house, staring at the door that had just closed in my face. Just hours earlier, I'd watched helplessly as muddy water engulfed my home of 40 years, the house where I'd raised my son Timothy alone after his father walked out, where I'd worked extra shifts to ensure he had everything he needed, where I'd stored every memory of our life together. Gone. All of it gone. When the evacuation orders came, I grabbed what I could: my medication, a photo album, and the small box containing my mother's wedding ring. The water was already ankle-deep by then, rushing through my front door with terrifying force. "Mom, just get out. Come to our place," Timothy had said when I called in panic. Relief had washed over me. My son would help me through this nightmare. We'd always been close, or so I thought. I arrive at his suburban home, drenched and exhausted. Timothy answered the door, his expression shifting from concern to discomfort when he saw me. "Mom, He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. That's when she appeared. Eleanor, my daughter-in-law of 3 years. Her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. "Timothy, remember what we discussed?" she whispered, not caring that I could hear every word. My son's shoulders slumped. He wouldn't meet my eyes when he finally spoke the words that hurt more than losing my home. "We want privacy, Mom. Eleanor doesn't want you here." The pain was immediate, physical, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it threatened to stop beating. "But the flood! My house is under water. Where am I supposed to go?" "There are shelters," Eleanor said, stepping forward. "The Red Cross has set them up at the high school." A shelter? My son was sending me to a shelter while he stood in the doorway of his 4-bedroom house? A house with a guest room I helped furnish. "Timothy, please." I reached for him, but he stepped back. "I'm sorry, Mom. We need our space." Stories like mine happen every day to parents who never see the rejection coming. Subscribe now. Don't miss the warning signs I failed to recognize until it was too late. As I turned away, the rain mixing with my tears, I clutched my plastic bag tighter. Inside was not just a photo album, but proof of something my son had forgotten. What Timothy didn't realize was that everything he owned, including the roof over his head, existed because of a sacrifice I made 30 years ago. A sacrifice that would now force him to face the truth about the woman he married. I never thought I'd be one of those parents who gave everything only to be forgotten. But looking back, perhaps I should have seen it coming. 30 years ago, when Timothy was just 5, his father walked out. No warning, no goodbye, just a note on the kitchen table. "This life isn't for me." I remember Timothy's small hand in mine as we stood in the doorway, watching for his father's car to return. It never did. "Is Daddy coming back?" Timothy asked every night for months. "It's just us now, sweetheart," I'd whisper, holding him until he fell asleep. Our little house on Maple Street wasn't much, 1,100 square feet with peeling paint and creaky floorboards, but it was ours. I'd planted rose bushes along the front walkway, hung Timothy's artwork on every wall, and saved for years to build the treehouse he'd begged for in the backyard oak. I took on 2 jobs, receptionist at the dental office during the day and waitressing at night. Most evenings, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door would watch Timothy until I dragged myself home near midnight, feet swollen, back aching. "Mommy, I saved you some dinner," he'd say, proudly showing me a plate of cold macaroni and cheese he'd made himself. Those early years blur together now, a constant cycle of work, bills, and stolen moments with my son. I missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I rationed groceries and patched clothes instead of replacing them. But Timothy never went without the essentials. When he showed academic promise in middle school, I sold my mother's china to pay for a math tutor. When he joined the debate team in high school, I picked up weekend shifts to cover travel expenses. Every dollar I earned went to building his future. My album of photographs tracked his journey. Timothy missing his front teeth at 7, gangly and awkward at 13, handsome in his graduation gown at 18. Each picture represented thousands of hours of work, countless sacrifices made silently, joyfully. The morning of the flood, I woke to an odd sound, a gurgling, rushing noise that didn't belong in our quiet neighborhood. The dim pre-dawn light filtered through my curtains as I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet meeting not the worn carpet, but cold water. "What on earth?" I gasped, fully awake now. I splashed through the hallway toward Timothy's old room, now my craft space where I made quilts to sell online for extra income. The water was already 6 inches deep and rising fast. Outside my window, the street had transformed into a rushing river, carrying branches, trash cans, even a neighbor's kayak. My phone shrieked with an emergency alert. "Flash flood warning. Evacuate immediately." Panic seized me as I realized how quickly the water was rising. I grabbed a plastic storage bin and began throwing in essentials: medication, important documents, my purse. The power flickered and died as water reached the electrical outlets. In the dim light, I spotted the shelf holding our family photo albums. The bottom album, Timothy's baby pictures, was already submerged. I lunged for the others, slipping and falling into the now knee-deep water. By the time I stood, soaked and shivering, the bottom 2 albums had dissolved into floating fragments of paper, Timothy's earliest memories literally washing away before my eyes. Family betrayal strikes without warning, just like floodwaters in the night. Subscribe now for protection. Learn to recognize the signs I missed before it's too late. I waded to the kitchen, water now at my thighs, to grab my mother's wedding ring from the cookie jar where I'd always kept it. The jar was gone, swept away by the current now flowing through my home. 30 years of mementos, photographs, and keepsakes disappeared in minutes. By the time I managed to get outside, clutching my meager, salvaged belongings, neighbors were evacuating in boats and inflatable rafts. The Wilsons from across the street spotted me on my porch. "Patricia, get in quickly," Frank Wilson called, maneuvering their aluminum fishing boat to my steps. From the water, I watched my little house slowly disappear under the murky floodwater. The tree house I'd built for Timothy, the one he'd later used to sneak out to meet friends as a teenager, peeked above the waterline, its small window like a sorrowful eye witnessing the destruction. What few people knew was how close I'd come to losing that house many times over the years. When Timothy needed braces, I skipped 3 mortgage payments and nearly faced foreclosure. When college tuition bills arrived, I took out a second mortgage, stretching my budget to the breaking point. "You're making a mistake, Marjorie," warned my sister. "Timothy should take out student loans like everyone else." "No," I insisted. "He won't start his adult life in debt." I never told Timothy about the financial gymnastics, the sleepless nights counting pennies, the credit card debt I accumulated to keep him in that prestigious university. He assumed we were comfortable enough, not wealthy, but stable. In truth, I'd been one emergency away from financial collapse for most of his childhood, but seeing him graduate debt-free, watching him land his first job at that marketing firm, his future bright and unburdened, made every sacrifice worthwhile. Timothy flourished in his career, climbing quickly from junior copywriter to creative director. He met Eleanor at a company retreat, polished, ambitious, from a wealthy family. She never tried to hide her distaste for our modest home and my simple lifestyle. "Mom, Eleanor thinks I should invest in real estate." Timothy announced during one visit 3 months into their relationship. That's a big step, I cautioned. Property can be risky. Eleanor's father does it all the time, he replied dismissively. We need to think about building wealth. That was the first time I noticed the shift, the way he began parroting Eleanor's phrases, adopting her priorities. The phone calls grew less frequent. Visits shortened. When they married in an extravagant ceremony at their parents' country club, I sat in the back row wearing a dress I'd saved 3 months to afford. 2 years ago, when Timothy mentioned they were house hunting, I offered the savings I'd slowly rebuilt. We have a down payment fund already, Mom, he said, looking embarrassed by my offer. What he didn't know was that I'd already helped him in ways he couldn't imagine. The red flags were there all along. Subscribers know what to watch for when a loved one begins to change, when outside influences start to poison family bonds. As I climbed into my neighbor's boat that flood morning, clutching my plastic bag of salvaged memories, I made a decision. I would call Timothy. Despite the growing distance between us, despite Eleanor's obvious disdain, he was still my son. Blood still meant something. Or so I thought. What I didn't realize as I dialed his number, water still dripping from my clothes, was that the document I'd managed to save, tucked inside that photo album, would soon force Timothy to choose between the truth and the life Eleanor had constructed for him, a truth that would wash away her lies like the flood had washed away my home.
The Uber driver looked skeptical when I gave him Timothy's address. I couldn't blame him. My soaked clothes, disheveled hair, and the plastic bag clutched to my chest hardly matched the neighborhood we were heading to. "You sure that's right, ma'am? That's Oakwood Heights," he asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. "Yes, it's my son's house," I replied, trying to maintain some dignity. As we pulled into the gated community, massive homes with manicured lawns stretched in every direction, Timothy and Eleanor's house stood at the end of a curved driveway, a sprawling 2-story with stone columns and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of house I'd only seen in magazines. My hands trembled as I paid the driver with my emergency cash. Standing there, I felt small, diminished by the grandeur before me. The doorbell chimed melodiously inside when I pressed it. Timothy answered, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Mom, you're soaked. Come in, come in." He ushered me inside, taking my suitcase. "The flooding reached your neighborhood? I had no idea it was that bad." The marble foyer opened to a soaring living room with white furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Family photos lined the mantel, but I noticed none included me. "It's all gone, Timothy," I said, my voice catching. "The water came so fast. I barely got out with these few things." His face softened. "Let me get you a towel and some dry clothes. Eleanor has some sweatpants that might fit you." For a moment, I glimpsed my little boy again, the one who'd bring me dandelions and crayon drawings to cheer me up after long shifts. "You can stay in the guest room until we figure things out," he added, heading toward the stairs. Relief washed over me. My son wouldn't turn his back on me after all. That relief was short-lived. "Timothy, who was at the door?" Eleanor's voice called from upstairs. Her footsteps clicked against hardwood before she appeared at the top of the staircase, looking down at the puddle forming beneath me on her imported tile. She wore yoga clothes that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, her blonde hair pulled into a perfect ponytail. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Patricia, what a surprise," she said flatly. Timothy's demeanor changed instantly. His shoulders tensed, his expression became guarded. It was like watching a puppet whose strings had just been pulled. "Eleanor, Mom's house was hit by the flood. She needs a place to stay for a while." Eleanor descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. "Oh, that's terrible. But Timothy, remember, we discussed this. Your mother should file an insurance claim. They'll cover temporary housing. My insurance lapsed 3 months ago. I had to choose between that and my heart medication. Timothy looked shocked. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Before I could answer, Eleanor placed a hand on his arm, squeezing slightly. This is exactly what I've been saying, Timothy. Your mother makes these poor financial decisions and then expects us to bail her out. That's not fair, I protested. I've never asked you for money. Not directly, Eleanor countered, her voice sweet, but her eyes cold. But there's always some crisis, isn't there? The roof repair last year, the car trouble at Christmas. Eleanor, Timothy warned, but his voice lacked conviction. She turned to him, her back to me. We talked about this. Remember what Dr. Phillips said about establishing boundaries, about your tendency to feel responsible for problems you didn't create? My stomach clenched. They'd been discussing me with a therapist? I just need a place to stay for a few days, just until I can contact FEMA or find a rental. Eleanor sighed dramatically. Timothy, can I speak with you privately? They disappeared into the kitchen, but their voices carried. She can't stay here, Eleanor insisted. We have the Hendersons' dinner party tomorrow, the charity gala this weekend. She's my mother, Timothy replied, but weakly. And I'm your wife. We agreed that your mother's constant emergencies wouldn't dictate our lives anymore. Their whispers grew more heated. I stood there, dripping on their perfect floor, feeling like an intruder. When they returned, I already knew what was coming. Timothy couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, I think it would be better if you stayed at one of the emergency shelters. Just temporarily. We can help you find an apartment once things settle down. The betrayal stung like a physical blow. You want me to go to a shelter when you have 5 empty bedrooms in this house? We need our privacy, Eleanor interjected. Timothy works from home, I have my meditation practice, and frankly, having a house guest disrupts our routine. A house guest? I repeated, my voice rising. I'm your mother, Timothy. Mom, please don't make this harder. Make what harder? Your mother's decision to send your mother to sleep on a cot in a high school gymnasium while you live in this mansion? Eleanor stepped forward. Patricia, your emotional manipulation won't work here. Timothy and I have worked very hard to establish healthy boundaries with you. Boundaries? Is that what you call abandoning family when they need you most? Timothy ran his hair through his hair, a nervous habit since childhood. Mom, it's not abandonment. It's just, we want privacy. Eleanor doesn't want you here. There it was, the naked truth. I see, I whispered, the fight draining out of me. I'll call you tomorrow, Timothy offered weakly as I picked up my suitcase. Eleanor already had the door open. I'll order you another Uber, she said, phone in hand. As I stepped back into the rain, Eleanor whispered something to Timothy that made him close the door quickly behind me. No goodbye, no umbrella offered, nothing. I sat on their covered porch steps, waiting for the ride that would take me to the shelter, clutching my plastic bag of salvaged belongings. Through the window, I could see them, Eleanor gesturing emphatically, Timothy nodding along. The perfect couple in their perfect house, unburdened by an inconvenient mother. Could you ever imagine being rejected by your own child? If you want to protect yourself from family betrayal, subscribe now. The Uber arrived, its headlights cutting through the rain. As I settled in the back seat, I opened the plastic bag to check if my photo album had survived the journey. Something slipped from between its pages. A yellowed envelope I'd forgotten was there. Inside was a document I'd hidden away decades ago, thinking it no longer mattered. But as I read the faded text, my hands began to shake. The photo album I managed to save contained proof of something my son's wife never wanted revealed, a truth about Eleanor's past that would shatter the foundation of their marriage.
The Red Cross shelter at Westfield High School Gymnasium was everything you'd expect: crowded, noisy, and lacking privacy. Rows of green cots lined the basketball court, separated by mere inches. Volunteers handed out scratchy blankets and bottled water to shell-shocked flood victims. "Name?" asked the tired volunteer at the registration table. "Patricia Winters," I said, clutching my plastic bag closer. "Any medical conditions we should know about?" "High blood pressure, but my medication," I trailed off, realizing it was probably floating somewhere in the murky floodwater. The volunteer nodded sympathetically and assigned me cot number 47. I made my way there, past families with crying children, elderly couples holding hands, and lone survivors staring blankly ahead. My cot was positioned against the wall, offering at least one side of quasi-privacy. I sat down heavily, the events of the day crashing over me in waves. My home, my son, my dignity, all washed away in a single day. A woman about my age settled onto the neighboring cot. "First day here?" she asked, offering a small smile. "Is it that obvious?" "The look of betrayal is universal," she replied. "I'm Gladys. My daughter dropped me off here 3 days ago. Said she'd come back once she figured something out. Haven't heard from her since." Something about Gladys's matter-of-fact acceptance broke through my shock. Tears I'd been holding back spilled over. "My son," I managed between sobs. "He chose his wife over me." Gladys patted my hand. "They usually do. Doesn't make it hurt any less." That night, lying on the thin mattress, listening to strangers' snores and muffled crying, I examined the document I had found in my photo album. It was a credit report for Timothy from 6 months ago, when I'd grown concerned about his spending habits. The report showed maxed out credit cards, a second mortgage on the house, and several late payments. Why had Timothy hidden his financial troubles? He'd always projected success, describing promotions and bonuses. The last time I'd visited, he'd proudly shown off their new kitchen renovation with marble countertops and custom cabinets. Financial deceit ruins families from the inside out. Subscribe now for the warning signs I missed that could have saved us both from heartbreak. Sleep evaded me as memories surfaced, subtle changes in Timothy's behavior that I dismissed or rationalized away. 3 years ago, at Christmas dinner shortly after meeting Eleanor, Timothy checked his phone constantly, tension visible in his shoulders. "Everything okay?" I'd asked. "Eleanor needs updates throughout the evening," he'd explain, typing rapidly. "Updates about what?" "Just where I am, who I'm with, when I'll be back." I'd frowned. "That seems excessive." "She has trust issues from past relationships," he'd replied defensively. "I don't mind reassuring her." Then came the canceled plans. Timothy had always visited on my birthday, a tradition since he'd moved out for college. But after Eleanor, those visits became phone calls, then text messages. "Eleanor booked us a couples retreat that weekend. I can't get out of it, Mom. She already paid the deposit." My sister Marjorie noticed the pattern before I did. "Have you seen Timothy lately?" she asked during one of our weekly calls. "He's been busy," I defended. "His job is demanding." "He missed Thanksgiving, Christmas, and your birthday. That's not busy, Pat. That's isolated." I brushed off her concerns. Now, lying in the shelter, I realized Marjorie had been right. The morning brought weak sunlight and the smell of institutional coffee. I queued up for the breakfast line, scanning the room for Gladys. She waved me over to a corner table where she sat with another woman. "Patricia, this is Darlene. Her son-in-law is a real estate agent. Tell her what happened." Darlene nodded sympathetically as I recounted my story. "Your son lives in Oakwood Heights?" she asked, brow furrowed. "With Eleanor Blackwood?" My heart skipped. "Eleanor Wilson now. They married 3 years ago." Darlene and Gladys exchanged glances. "Eleanor Blackwood Wilson is my nephew's ex," Darlene said slowly. "She nearly ruined him financially before moving on to her next target." My hands trembled around my styrofoam cup. "What do you mean?" "She finds men with potential or family money, marries them, isolates them from family, then takes everything in the divorce. She's done it twice that I know of." The room seemed to tilt. "That can't be right. Timothy would have told me if she'd been married before." "Does he know?" Darlene asked pointedly. After breakfast, I borrowed Darlene's phone and called the one person who might help, my nephew Robert, who worked at the county clerk's office. "Aunt Pat, are you okay? I heard about the flooding." "I'm at the shelter, Bobby. I need a favor." I lowered my voice. "Can you look up marriage records for an Eleanor Blackwood?" "That's not exactly protocol," he hesitated. "Please, it's important." He sighed. "Give me a few hours." I spent the day helping volunteers distribute supplies, keeping busy to quiet my racing thoughts. By evening, my nephew called back. "I found 2 previous marriages for Eleanor Blackwood. First to Gregory Phillips in 2012, divorced 2014, then to Richard Hernandez in 2016, divorced 2018. She married your Timothy in 2020. My stomach nodded. "Bobby, can you check something else? Property records for Timothy's house?" Another pause. "Aunt Pat, please." The wait felt eternal. When my phone rang again, Bobby's voice was grim. "The house was purchased with a loan in Timothy's name only, but the deed was transferred to joint ownership last year. There's also a second mortgage taken out 3 months ago, $200,000. "What would they need that money for? They just renovated." "Not sure, but there's something else. I found a civil case filing, Eleanor Blackwood Wilson versus Coastal Regional Bank. She's suing them for denying a loan application. The bank claims fraud as their defense." My mind raced. Timothy's financial struggles, Eleanor's pattern of marriages, the isolation from family. It was all connected. "One more thing, Aunt Pat. I checked property listings. Your son's house went on the market yesterday. It's being sold as is, immediate occupancy." The room spun. They were selling the house? Where were they going? I thanked Bobby and hung up, my thoughts churning. Opening my photo album again, I carefully examined the document I'd found earlier. It wasn't just Timothy's credit report. Attached was a letter I'd forgotten about, addressed to me from Eleanor's first husband's mother. She'd reached out after seeing Timothy and Eleanor's engagement announcement in the local paper. "Your son is in danger," the letter warned. "Eleanor destroyed my son's life and finances before discarding him. She is not who she pretends to be." I dismissed it as the bitter ramblings of an ex's mother. Now, reading it again, ice formed in my veins. The final page was what stunned me most. A copy of a trust document Timothy had signed 6 months ago, transferring his future inheritance from me into a joint account with Eleanor. He'd forged my signature as the grantor. This document changed everything I thought I knew about my son and his wife. Subscribe now. Don't miss the crucial details that could protect your family from master manipulators like Eleanor.
As I stared at the forged signature, a shelter volunteer approached me. "Patricia Winters, there's someone here to see you." I looked up, expecting perhaps Marjorie or another relative who'd heard about my situation. Instead, I found myself face to face with Gregory Phillips, Eleanor's first husband. "Mrs. Winters," he said quietly, "I think it's time we talked about what your daughter-in-law is really planning. Your son's life may depend on it."
Gregory Phillips looked nothing like I expected. Instead of a bitter ex-husband, I found a composed man in his early 40s with kind eyes that carried a familiar weariness. "Can we talk somewhere private?" he asked, glancing around the crowded gymnasium. We found a quiet corner in the school's empty cafeteria. I clutched my photo album and documents protectively as we sat across from each other at a long table. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Eleanor keeps tabs on her investments," he said carefully. "When I heard Timothy Wilson's mother lost her home in the flood, I connected the dots." "Why are you here?" He took a deep breath. "Because 5 years ago, no one warned me about Eleanor. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd lost my savings, my house, and nearly my life." "Your life?" My voice came out as a whisper. Gregory rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long scar running from wrist to elbow. "Eleanor has a pattern: marry, isolate, extract, discard. When I confronted her about emptying our accounts, she became unpredictable." My hand flew to my mouth. "Are you saying she—" "I'm saying Eleanor Blackwood isn't just a gold digger, she's dangerous." His eyes held mine. "And your son is in phase 3, extract." The room seemed to shrink around me as Gregory detailed Eleanor's methodology, how she'd isolated him from family, convinced him to combine finances, maxed out credit in his name, then vanished with everything liquid while leaving him with crushing debt. The second husband, Richard, he had a convenient accident after confronting her about missing money. "What happened to him?" I barely managed to ask. "Carbon monoxide poisoning while Eleanor was conveniently out of town. Ruled accidental, but—" He let the implication hang. I felt the last thread of my composure snap. My son, my only child, wasn't just being manipulated financially. He was in physical danger. The weight of it all crashed over me. My home destroyed, my son controlled by a predator, my lifetime of sacrifice reduced to this moment in a shelter cafeteria. I buried my face in my hands and wept, deep guttural sobs that came from a place of pure despair. All the strength I'd summoned to raise Timothy alone, to work multiple jobs, to push through every hardship suddenly evaporated. "I've lost everything," I choked out. "My home, my son, my purpose. I have nothing left." Gregory sat silently, allowing me this moment of complete breakdown. When my sobs finally quieted to irregular breaths, he spoke again. "You have something Eleanor doesn't expect." I looked up, eyes swollen. "What's that?" "Me and these." He placed a folder on the table. "Police reports, bank records, medical files, everything I've gathered on Eleanor over the past 5 years. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because I couldn't save myself, but maybe we can save your son." His gaze was steady. "And because Eleanor needs to be stopped before someone else dies." I stared at the folder, at my photo album with its damning documents, at my trembling hands. A strange calm began to settle over me, the kind that comes from not peace, but from absolute clarity. When I woke up to the flood, I had a choice: stay and drown or fight to survive. I chose to fight. Gregory nodded. "And now?" I realize I can drown in grief or rise above this flood too. I straighten my shoulders. I'm not going to let Eleanor destroy my son. Transform your own family crisis before it's too late. Subscribe for the strategies that could save your loved ones from predators like Eleanor. Over the next 2 hours, Gregory and I pieced together Eleanor's plan. The house sale, the second mortgage, the suspicious timing of it all. She's preparing to disappear, Gregory confirmed. Once the house sells and she has access to the cash, she'll vanish, with or without Timothy. How do we stop her? Not by confronting her directly, he warned. She's too cunning, too prepared. We need to outmaneuver her. Together, we crafted a plan that utilized my greatest strength, the one thing Eleanor had underestimated, a mother's intimate knowledge of her child. I get a tell when he's hiding something, I explained. He's had it since he was 5. If we can get him alone, make him face the evidence. It's risky, Gregory cautioned. Eleanor rarely leaves his side now. Then we create a reason she'll want to be elsewhere. The strategy formed in my mind, complex yet elegant in its simplicity. We'll need help. My sister, my nephew at the county clerk's office, and Eleanor's parents. Do they know what she's done? Gregory's expression shifted. They're part of the reason she is who she is. Her father taught her how to run these schemes. The final piece clicked into place. Eleanor wasn't just a lone predator. She was part of a family operation, and they had chosen my son as their next victim. I stood, gathering the documents with newfound determination. The weak, sobbing woman from moments ago had vanished, replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone with steel in their spine and fire in their eyes. I've spent my entire life protecting my son. Eleanor has no idea what she's up against. Ready to reclaim your power from those who have taken advantage of you? Our subscribers already know how to turn vulnerability into strength. As we left the cafeteria, Gregory placed a hand on my arm. There's one more thing you should know. The reason Eleanor targeted Timothy specifically? Because of his success? His earning potential? No, Gregory's expression was grim. Because of you, or more specifically, because of what you unknowingly have. I don't understand. I have nothing. The flood took everything. Not everything, he said quietly. Eleanor's family has been searching for a specific item for years, something they believe you possess that's worth far more than Timothy's income or even your house. What could I possibly have that would be worth all this? The deed to 60 acres of land that now sits directly above the largest untapped natural gas reserve in the state. The land deed. My father's property in Weston, Pennsylvania. 60 acres of seemingly worthless woodland he'd left me decades ago. I'd forgotten about it completely. That's impossible, I whispered. That land is nothing but trees and underbrush. Not anymore, Gregory replied. 3 years ago, geological surveys discovered one of the largest natural gas deposits in the region runs directly beneath it. Companies have been quietly buying up surrounding parcels. Your deed is the last piece they need. Suddenly, Eleanor's interest in Timothy made perfect sense. She hadn't chosen him for his income or even his assets. She'd targeted him because of me, because of land I didn't even remember owning. Our plan took shape over the next 48 hours. Gregory contacted Richard Hernandez, Eleanor's second husband, who had survived his accident but lived in fear of her family's connections. My nephew pulled additional records. My sister Marjorie, initially skeptical, became our most valuable asset when she recalled meeting Eleanor's father at Timothy's wedding. He asked about family heirlooms, seemed particularly interested in any property passed down through generations. By day 3, we were ready. I borrowed clothes from a shelter donation bin, a simple black dress and cardigan that looked respectable enough for what I needed to do.
Gregory drove me to Timothy and Eleanor's house in his sensible sedan. "Remember," Gregory cautioned, "Eleanor is dangerous when cornered. Stick to the plan." I raised my son through poverty, flood, and heartbreak. I'm not afraid of Eleanor. I called Timothy from Gregory's phone, my voice carefully modulated to sound weak and defeated. "Mom, whose phone is this?" Timothy answered, surprised. "A volunteer at the shelter." "Timothy, I need to see you, just you. I have important papers I need to sign over before things get worse." "Papers? What papers?" "Legal documents about an inheritance for you. Please, can you come to the shelter? I don't have much time." His hesitation was palpable. "I'll have to check with Eleanor." "Don't tell her," I interrupted, injecting fear into my voice. "Please, Timothy. Just once, come alone. It's about the land deed." The magic words. I could almost hear his posture change. "The deed? You have it with you?" "Yes, hurry." 30 minutes later, Timothy's BMW pulled into the high school parking lot. From our vantage point, we watched him exit alone, exactly as I had hoped. Eleanor would never dirty her designer shoes in a disaster shelter, not even for a land deed. She'd send Timothy to retrieve it. What my son didn't realize was that while he drove to the shelter, Gregory, Richard, and my nephew Bobby were executing the second phase of our plan at the county courthouse. I met Timothy at the shelter entrance, clutching a manila envelope. "Mom, you look okay," he said awkwardly. "No thanks to you," I replied, my tone deliberately cold. He flinched. "Look, about the other day, we don't have time for that. Eleanor thinks you're where exactly?" Confusion crossed his face. "At a client meeting? Mom, what's going on?" "Follow me." I led him to the cafeteria, where shelter administrators had allowed us to use a private room. Inside waited Marjorie, Bobby, and a woman Timothy had never met, Sandra Phillips, Gregory's sister, and a district attorney. "What is this?" Timothy demanded, stopping at the threshold. "An intervention," I said simply. "Sit down." To my surprise, he did. Perhaps some part of him, the part that was still my son, recognized the authority in my voice, the same tone I'd used when he'd broken curfew or failed to complete his chores. I placed my evidence on the table one piece at a time: Eleanor's previous marriage certificates, police reports, financial records showing identical patterns of fraud, the letter from Gregory's mother warning me years ago. Timothy's face grew paler with each document. "This can't be right," he muttered. But his tell, the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, betrayed him. He'd suspected something wasn't right for a long time. "Your house went on the market yesterday," I continued calmly. That's impossible. I would have to sign." He stopped, the realization dawning. "Power of attorney," Sandra interjected. "You gave it to her last year for estate planning purposes. She can sell your house without your signature." Timothy's hands trembled as he picked up the most damning document, a transfer form moving funds from their joint account to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. The transfer was scheduled for tomorrow, the day after their house was expected to sell. "She's been planning to leave you," I said gently, "just like she left Gregory and Richard." "But why?" Timothy whispered, his world visibly crumbling. "We have a good life. I gave her everything she wanted." "Not everything," I replied, placing the final document on the table, a copy of my father's land deed. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "The land in Pennsylvania? The worthless forest plot Grandpa left you?" "Worthless?" I laughed softly. "That land sits on a natural gas deposit worth millions. Eleanor's family has been acquiring surrounding parcels for years. My deed is the missing piece." Timothy looked stricken. "She married me to get to your land?" "Yes. And once she had it, you would become unnecessary." I didn't need to spell out the implication. The police reports detailing Richard's accident lay open before him. "What do I do?" he asked, suddenly looking like the little boy who'd come to me with skinned knees and broken toys. "She'll know I've been here. She tracks my phone." "We're counting on that," Sandra replied, checking her watch. "In fact, she should be arriving at the courthouse right about now." On cue, Bobby's phone chimed with a text. "She's there," he confirmed, "with her father." "What's happening at the courthouse?" Timothy asked. "Gregory and Richard are filing charges of fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. With evidence from all 3 cases, plus documentation of the land scheme, we have enough to put Eleanor and her father away for a very long time." "But that's not the best part," I added, unable to keep this satisfaction from my voice. "While Eleanor is being arrested, the FBI is raiding your house with a search warrant. They'll find everything she's been hiding." Timothy's face crumpled. "I've been such a fool!" I reached across the table and took his hand, the first physical contact we'd had in over a year. "No, you've been a victim, just like Gregory and Richard. She's an expert manipulator. I turned my back on you. After everything you've done for me, I chose her." "You were under her influence," I said softly. "But now you have a choice again." His phone buzzed, Eleanor's face lighting up the screen. We all stared at it. "What do I do?" he asked. "Answer it," Sandra instructed. "Act normal. Say you're heading home now." Timothy took a deep breath and answered. We could hear Eleanor's panicked voice through the speaker. "Timothy, where are you? You need to come to the courthouse right now. There's been a misunderstanding." "Timothy, what's wrong? Why are you at the courthouse?" Timothy's voice was remarkably steady. "Just get here. Bring cash for bail. Don't tell anyone." A commotion interrupted her, followed by the distinctive sound of rights being read. The call ended abruptly. Timothy looked up, shock-shelled. "It's real. All of it." I squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way." "Why didn't you tell me earlier, when you first suspected?" Here was the moment I'd been dreading. "Because Eleanor had already convinced you I was manipulative and needy, because she monitored your calls and messages, and because—" I hesitated. "Because what?" "I protected you from something worse than Eleanor, something I didn't fully understand until 3 days ago." I slid the final document toward him, a federal investigation report into the Blackwood family's decades-long history of fraud, coercion, and violence. Timothy wasn't just Eleanor's husband. He was her unwitting accomplice in a scheme that could have sent him to prison alongside her. If I had confronted you earlier, you might have told her, and if she believed you knew too much— The implication hung in the air between us. Timothy stared at the report, then at me, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "You didn't just save me from a divorce. You saved my life." As the full weight of his situation sank in, Timothy did something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. He broke down completely, sobbing in my arms like a child. "What happens now?" he asked when he could finally speak again. Before I could answer, Sandra's phone rang. Her expression shifted from professional to surprised as she listened. "That was my colleague at the courthouse," she said, hanging up. "They found something unexpected in Eleanor's father's briefcase, something he apparently never lets out of his sight." "What?" we all asked simultaneously. Sandra looked directly at me. "The original deed to your father's land stolen from your house 3 years ago, and next to it, a geological survey showing not just natural gas, but some—"
The weeks following Eleanor's arrest unfolded like scenes from a movie I never expected to star in. Eleanor and her father were denied bail, deemed flight risks due to offshore accounts and multiple identities discovered during the investigation. Timothy spent 3 days being questioned by federal agents, emerging exhausted but legally cleared of involvement. Our relationship remained fragile, wounded by betrayal, yet bound by blood and shared trauma. We circled each other cautiously, like dancers learning new steps. Rare earth minerals, Timothy said one evening as we sat in my temporary apartment, a modest one-bedroom paid for by the insurance settlement that finally came through. Not just natural gas, the land contains elements critical for electronics manufacturing, worth tens of millions. I stirred my tea, watching the leaves swirl. Your grandfather always said that land would provide for us someday. I thought he meant timber. Timothy stared into his untouched coffee. All this time, Eleanor was after something we didn't even know we had. And that's often how it works. We overlook our own value until someone tries to steal it. The silence between us stretched, filled with unspoken regrets. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom," he finally whispered, his voice breaking. "I abandoned you when you needed me most. I chose someone who only wanted to use me, use us both." "You were manipulated by an expert," I reminded him. "Gregory and Richard fell into the same trap. They didn't have you as their mother." His eyes, so like his father's, finally met mine. "They didn't have someone who sacrificed everything to give them a good life." I set down my cup, emotion tightening my throat. When you have a child, Timothy, you don't keep score. You don't love with conditions or expectations. "But you deserve better," he insisted. "How can you even look at me after what I did?" The question hung between us, heavy with his shame and my lingering hurt. I considered my answer carefully. When the flood came, I lost everything I owned. Photos, furniture, clothes, all the physical proof of our life together. But I realized something important in that shelter cot. Those things aren't what matter. I reached for his hand. What matters is what I carried inside me all along. The strength to start over. The wisdom to recognize true enemies from false friends. The capacity to forgive, even when it hurts. Wisdom comes from others' mistakes. Subscribe to learn faster. Protect yourself and those you love from manipulators. A tear slipped down Timothy's cheek. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to break the cycle of hurt. Eleanor manipulated you, yes, but she succeeded partly because I raised you to trust too easily, to see the good in everyone. That's on me. "No, Mom." "Let me finish," I continued. "We both made mistakes, but now we have a chance to rebuild. Separately and together, with clearer eyes." The geological survey had revealed my father's worthless woodland to be worth millions. The legal team handling Eleanor's prosecution helped me secure my rightful ownership, and offers from mining companies poured in. After a lifetime of financial struggle, I suddenly had resources I'd never imagined. I bought a small house. Nothing fancy, but it's mine, free and clear. No mortgage, no debt. "That's wonderful," he said, genuine happiness breaking through his guilt. "Where?" 3 blocks from my old place. Same neighborhood, different perspective. I smiled. And I've set up a foundation to help flood victims rebuild, people like me who lost everything. Timothy looked down, ashamed. "While I turned you away." "Look at me," I said firmly. "What happened was terrible, but it taught me something valuable. I'd spent my entire life defining myself as your mother, sacrificing, providing, worrying. Now I know I'm more than that. I'm Patricia Winters in my own right." For the first time in weeks, Timothy's smile reached his eyes. "You always were extraordinary. I just couldn't see it clearly." The path forward wasn't simple. Timothy had his own rebuilding to do, financial, emotional, psychological. The house he'd shared with Eleanor was sold to pay legal fees and restitution to her previous victims. He moved into a modest apartment and started therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated. We didn't rush reconciliation. Some wounds need time to heal properly, but we had Sunday dinner sometimes. Awkward at first, then gradually more comfortable. We talked about boundaries, expectations, and the hard-earned wisdom that only comes from having your heart broken and finding the courage to let it heal. Can broken families heal after devastating betrayal? Subscribers already know the surprising answer that changed everything for us. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my new home, watching autumn leaves dance across the lawn. My phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. "Sunday dinner still on? Bringing dessert this time." I smiled as I replied, "Yes, 6 p.m. sharp." Our relationship will never be what it was before the flood, before Eleanor, but maybe it's stronger now, built on truth rather than obligation, a mutual respect rather than just family ties. The foundation I established has helped 12 families rebuild after losing everything. Gregory and Richard have become unexpected friends, their shared experience with Eleanor creating a bond that transcends our unusual circumstances. And that land my father left me, I've partnered with a responsible mining company that's committed to environmental restoration. The proceeds will fund disaster relief for generations to come. Sometimes I look back at that rainy night when I stood rejected on Timothy's doorstep, and I marvel at how a moment that seemed like the end of everything became the beginning of something new. Would you forgive a child who abandoned you when you needed them most? It's a question I've wrestled with through sleepless nights and tearful conversations. My answer came not from obligation, but from choice. A choice to break cycles of hurt rather than perpetuate them. What about you? Have you experienced family betrayal that forced you to rebuild your life? Share your story in the comments. Connection is how we heal. Not subscribing yet? I'm curious why. Let me know below. Your perspective matters to this community of survivors and thrivers. Which city are you watching from? I'd love to connect with viewers worldwide who understand that family bonds can break, but also mend in unexpected ways. Miss this story? The next one might save your family from disaster. Subscribe now to learn the warning signs I missed until it was almost too late. Next week, I'll share the shocking story of twins separated at birth who discovered each other through a dangerous coincidence, and the family secret that nearly cost them everything. It's a tale of identity, belonging, and the truths we hide even from ourselves.